vehicles, police said. The hostage taken has ended. Local police posted on X, formerly Twitter, on Sunday. The man has left his car with his daughter and been taken for questioning by security forces without resistance, it said, adding the child.
India's High Commissioner to Ottawa has said the investigations into the killing of Khalistani's figure Harneet Singh Nijjar may have already been tainted was a direction from someone at a high level to say India or Indian agents are behind it. High Commissioner Sanjay Kumar Verma made these remarks in an interview with the Canadian National Daily. There is no specific or relevant information provided in this case for us to assist them in the investigation, Verma told the outlet about statements from the Canadian government asking India to cooperate in the investigation into the murder on June 18th in the town of Surrey in the province of British Columbia. He added, "Where is the evidence? Where is the conclusion of the investigation? I would go a step further in saying now the investigation has already been tainted. The direction has come from someone at a high level to say India or Indian agents are behind it." Verma did not mention any names. On September 18th, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau stated in the House of Commons that there were credible allegations of a potential link between an Indian agent and the killing of the principal for the sessions of Group 6 for Justice in British Columbia. In the immediate aftermath of Trudeau's statement, which New Delhi described as absurd and motivated, both countries expelled the diplomats each since. In October, 41 Canadian diplomats were pulled from India after New Delhi said they would lose diplomats' immunity if they remain stationed. Canada describes the act as mass expulsion of its diplomats, while India has argued it wanted parity in the numbers of diplomats. Nijjar, the sessionist Group Sikh for Justice principal in British Columbia, was gunned down in the parking lot of the Guru Nanak Sikh Gurdwara and that he headed the town of Surrey. While India had accused Nijjar of being a terrorist, the charges against him were never tested in Canadian court. Canada is yet to provide any evidence of New Delhi's involvement in the killing. The newspaper reported that Canadian government sources have said intelligence implicating agents of India includes Indian diplomatic communications that were picked up by the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, as well as information from an unnamed Five Eyes ally. Other than Canada, the groups include the United States Kingdom, New Zealand, and Australia.
From Washington to Milan to Paris, tens of thousands of pro-Palestinian demonstrators marched Saturday, calling for a halt to Israel's bombardment of Gaza. The marches reflected growing disquiet about the mounting civilian casualty toll and suffering from the Israel-Hamas war. Protesters, particularly in countries with large Muslim population, including the US, UK, and France, expressed disillusionment with their governments for supporting Israel while its bombardment of hospitals and residential areas in the Gaza Strip intensify. The Palestinian death toll in the Israel-Hamas war has reached 9,448 according to the Hamas-run health ministry in Gaza. In Israel, more than 1,400 people have been killed, most of them in the October 7 Hamas attack that started the war. In the U.S., thousands converged on the nation's capital to protest the Biden administrator's support of Israel and its continued military campaign in Gaza. Palestine will be free. Demonstrators donning black and white kafirs chanted as an anonymous Palestinian flag was unfurled by a crowd that filled Pennsylvania Avenue, the street leading up to the White House, leveling direct criticism of President Joe Biden. Rena Dayam of Cleveland said she made the trip with her family so her children would know the Palestinian people are resilient, and we want a leader who will be a puppet to the Israeli government.
The U.S. military has acknowledged positioning a nuclear-capable submarine in the Middle East. It provided no other details in its online statement Sunday, though it posted an image that appeared to show a submarine in Egypt's Suez Canal near Suez Canal Bridge. U.S. acknowledgement of an Ohio-class submarine location is incredibly rare, as they represent part of America's so-called nuclear triad of atomic weapons, which also includes land-based ballistic missiles and nuclear bombs aboard strategic bombers. Several Ohio-class submarines instead carry cruise missiles and the capability to deploy with Special Operations Forces, though it is unclear if the submarine operating now in the Mid-East carries nuclear ballistic missiles. The United States has deployed submarines into the region before and announced its recent presence as tensions were high with Iran. Central Command separately released an image of a nuclear-capable B-1 bomber also operating in the Middle East on Sunday.
When U.S. President Joe Biden recently signed off an $80 million grant to Taiwan for the purchase of American military equipment, China said it deplores and opposes what Washington had done. To the casual observer, it didn't appear a step sum. It was less than the cost of a single modern fighter jet. Taiwan already has an order more than $14 billion worth of U.S. military equipment. Does a miserly $80 million more matter? Wild fury is Beijing's default response to any military support for Taiwan. This time something was different. The $80 million is not a loan. It comes from American taxpayers. For the first time in more than 40 years, America is using its own money to send weapons to a place it officially doesn't recognize. This is happening under a program called Foreign Military Finance. Since Russia's invasion of Ukraine last year, FMF has been used to send around $4 billion of military aid to Kyiv. It has been used to send billions more to Afghanistan, Iraq, Israel, and Egypt, and so on. But until now, it has only ever been given to countries' organizations recognized by the United Nations. Taiwan is not. After the U.S. switched diplomatic recognition from Taiwan to China in 1979, it continued to sell weapons to the island under the terms of the Taiwan Relations Act. The key was to sell just enough weapons so Taiwan could defend itself against possible Chinese attack, but not so many that they would destabilize relations between Washington and Beijing. For decades, the U.S. has relied on this so-called strategic ambiguity to do business with China, while remaining Taiwan's staunchest ally. But in the last decade, the military balance across the Taiwan Strait has tipped dramatically in China's favor. The old formula no longer works. Washington insists on policy. Its policy has not changed, but in crucial ways it has. The U.S. State Department has been quick to deny FMF implies any recognition of Taiwan. But in Taipei, it's apparent that America is redefining its relationship with the island, especially so given the urgency with which Washington is pushing Taiwan to rearm. And Taiwan, which is outmatched by China, needs the help. The U.S. is emphasizing the desperate need to improve our military capacity. It is sending a clear message of strategic clarity to Beijing that we stand together, says Wang Ting-yo, a ruling party legislator who, with close ties to Taiwan's president Tsai Ing-wen and to U.S. congressional chiefs. He says the $80 million is the tip of what could be a very large iceberg, and notes that in July, President Biden used discretionary powers to approve the sale of military services of equipment worth $500 million to Taiwan. Mr. Wang says Taiwan is preparing to send 2 battalions of ground troops to the U.S. for training, the first time this has happened since the 1970s. But the key is the money, the beginning of what he says could be up to $10 billion over the next 5 years. Deals involving military equipment can take up to 10 years, says Cheng Lai, president of the Prospect Foundation, Taipei-based think tank. But the FMF, the U.S. is sending weapons directly from its own stocks and its U.S. money, so we don't need to go through the whole approval process. This is important given that the divided Congress has held up billions of dollars worth of aid for Ukraine, although Taiwan appears to have far more bipartisan support. But the war in Gaza will undoubtedly squeeze America's weapons supply to Taipei, as has the war in Ukraine. President Biden is seeking war aid for Ukraine and Israel, which includes more money for Taiwan too. Ask the Ministry of National Defense in Taipei what U.S. money will be used for, and the response is a knowing smile and lightly sealed lips. But Mr. Lai says it's possible to make educated guesses. Javelin and Stinger anti-aircraft missiles, highly effective weapons that forces can lean to use quickly. We don't have enough of them, and we need a lot, he says. In Ukraine, the Stingers have run out very quickly, and the way Ukraine has been using them suggests we need maybe 10 times the number we currently have. The assessment of long-time observers is blunt. The island is woefully underprepared for a Chinese attack. The list of problems is long. Taiwan's army has hundreds of aging battle tanks, but too few modern light missile systems. Its army command structure, tactics, and doctrine haven't been updated in half a century. Many frontline units have only 60% of the manpower they should have. Taiwan's counterintelligence operations in China are reportedly non-existent, and its military conscription system is broken. In 2013, Taiwan reduced military service from 1 year to just 4 months before reinstating it back to 12 months, a move that takes effect next year. But there are bigger changes. It's jokingly referred to as a summer camp by young men who go through it. There was no regular training, says a recent graduate. We would go to a shooting range about once every 2 weeks, and we would use old guns from the 1970s. We did shoot at targets, but there was no proper teaching on how to aim, so everyone kept missing. We did zero exercise. There's a fitness test at the end, but we did no preparation for it. He described the system in which senior army commanders viewed these young men with utter indifference and have zero interest in training them, in part because they will be there for such a short time. In Washington, there is a strong sense that Taiwan is running out of time to reform and rebuild its military. So the U.S. is also starting to retrain Taiwan's army. For decades, the island's political and military leaders have lent heavily on the belief that invading the island is much too difficult and risky for China to attempt. Rather, like Britain, Taiwan prioritized its Navy and Air Force at the expense of its army. The idea was to engage them in a Taiwan Strait and annihilate them on the breaches. So we put lots of resources into air and sea defense, says Dr. Lai.
New York County Public Defender Victoria Roos has been caught removing posters of Israeli children kidnapped by Hamas terrorists. The videos in which she can be seen destroying the posters have gone viral on X, formerly Twitter. Netizens are framing over her actions and calling her out to resign immediately. In the viral clip, Ruiz can be seen walking away from the persons recording the video as he repeatedly asks her, "Why are you taking down pictures of innocent children?" After Ruiz didn't respond to the questions, the person recording the video seemed frustrated over her ignorance and remarked, "Why are you taking down pictures of babies?" Ruiz, who works for the New York County Defender Office, has received backlash over her actions. One social media user wrote, "Some of those posters display American kidnapped by Hamas. If she can defend American kids, how can she serve as a public defender in America?" Another angry user expressed, "You will need to thoroughly audit every case she ever walked on or touched." Victoria Ruiz is full of hatred, racism, arrogance, and lacking sound judgment or integrity. There is absolutely no way her or your clients were given anything close to the best possible legal defense they are entitled to. One more user said she has the emotional maturity of a 12-year-old who does get their way. How embarrassing, she's a New York County public defender, so triggered couldn't even walk by a post she didn't agree with. How embarrassing. According to press, the Israeli military has revealed that 242 people are being held hostage by Hamas, of which the estimated number of kidnapped children is 30. Several families affected by this have come forward with their statements. Only a month ago, Hamas militants released a shocking video of playing with kidnapped babies. Over 1,400 Israeli citizens have been so far.
More than 300 Americans, U.S. residents, and their families have been evacuated from the Gaza Strip as Israel's fight against Hamas rages, the White House said on Sunday. The evacuation carried out in recent days was the result of pretty intensive negotiations with all sides relevant to the conflict. White House Deputy National Security Advisor Jonathan Finer said. Despite these efforts, the United States believes there are still a number of Americans inside Gaza. He added, "This is obviously a major priority and one that we're going to continue to work out until every American who wants to leave is able to do so." Fina said the Rafah border crossing from Gaza to Egypt opened up on Wednesday after weeks of war, when a trickle of wounded Palestinians and people with dual nationality to leave, all desperate to escape Israel's bombardment. Egypt has said it would help evacuate 7,000 foreigners through the crossing. But Hamas said late Saturday that the evacuation of dual nationals and foreigners from was being suspended until Israel lets some wounded Palestinians reach Rafah so they can cross the border for hospital treatment. A senior White House official on Friday accused Hamas of abusing a U.S. brokered deal to open the crossing to get its fighters out of Gaza. A third of the names on a list provided by Hamas of Palestinians needing medical evacuation were those of Hamas members and fighters, the official said. Sunday's latest count of evacuated Americans comes after the White House said nearly 80 U.S. citizens and their family members had left Wednesday and Thursday. The fighting in Gaza was triggered by Hamas' bloody raids into Israel on October 7, which Israel's officials say killed more than 1,400 people, mainly civilians. The health ministry in Hamas-run Gaza says more than 9,227 people have died in Israeli bombardments, mostly women and children.
And that's the international news for today. Before we go, another major look at the headlines. U.S. diplomat Blinken urges Palestinian authorities to govern Gaza.
Villagers cremate bodies of earthquake victims.
Defense Ministry says Ukraine fire cruise missiles at shipyards.
Armed father hold toddler or daughter hostage.
Military acknowledges position in submarine in Mid-East.
President Biden signs $80 million grant to Taiwan.
I am Valentina Lawrence.
And I am Basila Chadamba.
Thank you for watching. You can follow us on all our social media platforms: on Twitter, Atlantic TV Net, Facebook and YouTube, Atlantic Television Network, and Instagram, Atlantic TV Network. Do remember that peace and unity are the pathways to progress.
Good afternoon.